Hello and welcome, my name is Trismegistus, and today we're going to be reading through and speculating about the latest Factorio Friday Facts. Friday Facts 386, Vulcanus, posted by Arundel. Hello there, I know a lot of you have been eagerly awaiting some solid information on the new planets. If so, this blog is for you. Get comfy because it's a long one. As you already know, there are 4 new planets in the expansion. We will take an in-depth look at each planet's terrain, challenges, processes, technologies and new gear, but not all at once. In some cases, the planet content will be split into multiple parts. To kick things off, I'll cover the terrain and natural aspects of the planet that is closest to being finished. I'll need to be in Games Master mode for this. Welcome to Vulcanus. Allow me to introduce this toasty volcanic wonderland, conveniently sandwiched between idyllic Nauvis and the sizzling sun. Vulcanus is closer to the sun than most would dare to venture, but trust me, it's a splendid place to start your interplanetary travels. There's then just the icon of the planet, or the sort of image of the planet, much more zoomed in. We previously saw it in Friday Facts 373. I'm assuming this orangey one is the Vulcanus, and this was perhaps the early, placeholder graphics. I think someone posted on Reddit that these are just Photoshop versions of, planets in the solar system. So this would be Venus that was edited. So we're now seeing the actual icon of the planet here. It's very yellow, and it's kind of highlighting some of the key features that they'll talk about, where you've got the yellow is the sulfur, the big sort of orange dots are volcanoes, and then you've got lava fields as well, and sort of ashen plains. They go on to explain those in the actual thing, but the icon is kind of showing those very clearly. I would interestingly to note that Vulcanus is the closest planet to the sun, and I'm reading this to mean that it is the only planet closer to the sun than Nauvis. So effectively we know that, if we go back to this image, we know that these are the 4 additional planets. So Nauvis kind of must, I would guess, sits in between those. Perhaps it goes Vulcanus, Nauvis, and then these other 3, but we'll have to see, obviously. It also has this, I don't know if this is a hint that basically Nauvis, that Vulcanus is going to be like the closest you can get to the sun, and you can't sort of fly into the sun or something like that, because it says it's closer to the sun than most would dare to venture, which to me, as I say, tends to suggest that that's perhaps the closest you can get to the sun, and it's the sort of hot planet. Now, I'm going to try and play the video while reading the thing out, because the idea of this video is that it's sort of narrated. So it says, our journey begins amidst the blazing volcanic mountains, imposing geological landforms that often feature a central lava pit. These fiery crucibles offer a great place to get rid of waste items. Just throw them in and poof, they're gone in a glorious puff of smoke and flame. Outdated gadgets, cursed rings of power, maybe even unwanted company. The high point of the mountains are the desolate ridges that surround the lava pits. This would be a good vantage point if it weren't for the thick yellow fog that burns your lungs and etches your eyes. Further down the mountainside, sulfuric acid geysers billow thick yellow smoke from fissures. The surrounding area is pitted by dried sulfur puddles, while sulfur-stained rock covers a large area. Feel the rock crunch under your footsteps. This area has calcite deposits leaching out of the rock. It can be mined easily by your trusty mining drills, but the many cliffs, valleys and rocky protrusions render this terrain unsuitable for anything larger than a small mining outpost. So this is the video sort of blown up a bit. What it's talking about, we're starting on a mountain. We then go through a sulfur area, and it's got these sort of fumarole type things and the sulfur points. We then leave that and we go into this sort of ashen wasteland. We find a lava pit. Interestingly, let's just pause there. We find a lava pit, and interestingly, we can throw items into the lava pit. So it's a way of disposing of stuff. I think that's particularly interesting. I mean, I suppose there's always, if you don't balance your systems or you can't balance them or what have you, there's always a possibility of ending up with excess items. But to me, that tends to suggest that you're going to get, for example, a real excess of something that you don't want, because, otherwise, you could just stick it in a chest and blow it up, sort of thing. I guess, you're remote and maybe you couldn't do that, but you could always shoot it with I guess you couldn't if you weren't there, because you can't force turrets to fire at things. But yeah, it seems an odd sort of thing to give us if there's not going to be an excess of items. Speaking of which, as we move on later on to this appears to be there's 2 new resources on Nauvis, like properly new. there's calcite deposits, and we're being told that this is the calcite deposit. It mentions later on that this is placeholder graphics. They're not actually going to look like this, but that's the first of our new resources. And then this opens up into a sort of more open area. These are all fumaroles. It mentions that later on. These are sort of things, but it sounds like maybe when they get old, when they're meant to be old, they become inactive, and you can't sort of mine them or get resources out of them. Is the implication? In the shadow of the mountains, the ashlands offer some semblance of tranquility in this turbulent landscape. The thick plains of insulating ash are like cool, comforting blankets that keep the worst of the heat at bay. Ashlands are the most habitable areas, but on this planet they're not saying much. That's not saying much. It's mostly a desert, but clusters of vegetation defy the harsh conditions to claim a precarious existence here. The only resource here is coal, vegetation that was buried in ash long ago, compressed, heated, and exposed once again. With flat terrain and sparse vegetation, if you're looking for a good location for a base, you won't do much better than the ashlands. Okay, so this is the second video. It follows on from the first. The idea appears to be that these, what they call ashlands, are the sort of main building area. One thing I didn't note on the first video as we're going through, because it seemed more appropriate here, but it talks about in the description about temperature, cool, comforting blanket that keeps most of the worst of the heat at bay. To me, why are they suddenly talking about heat? Heat doesn't matter for Factorio, except that presumably it now does. This planet is the closest to the sun, it's the hottest, it's a lava planet. We've seen that you can go through lava fields, and that there's meant to be volcanoes. So we go lava field there. It does actually show the fires. Now there could be a hazard, simple hazard that they spawn fires, and so they could set you on fire or damage your equipment. That could be one thing. But to me, it implies that you probably need a special suit to go to this planet, and that cooling is an issue for the player character. Maybe not quite that far, but it's interesting that they talk about heat. Another possibility, one thing they don't mention in this Friday Facts, in fact, is using geothermal power, basically. So the implication is there's no water on this planet, which is interesting. Some of the processes obviously require water, so where are we going to get water from? But there's no water on the planet, so do we need to transport water here in order to do steam things? It does mention, well, we'll come on to it later on, but it mentions coal liquefaction, and coal liquefaction uses steam. So where are we getting that water from? And can we just use the lava to melt it, for example, or temperature from the lava to melt it? But to me, as I say, it seems to imply that there's a hazard element to the planet, that it's fiery, and we just saw a little bit of fire there, and these are on fire. So I'm sort of guessing that, whether it's like space exploration and you get sort of localized hazards, and perhaps there's firestorms or something like that. But it's interesting that some of these trees are randomly on fire, and it's talked about temperature. To me, that implies that temperature is going to be a thing that you have to manage on this planet. We're now into the coal field. It's not very distinct, if I'm honest. It's a little unclear what it is, but it's coal basically, and that's kind of one of the few resources on the planet that's directly accessible. And then it just ends up here, and I say this is the vegetation. It explains that they've been calling them trees, but they're not really intended to be trees like with leaves. There's some sort of other plant life. And then we saw that the other one of the things that the other night, it does mention this later on, the lava actually glows, so it glows at night. Descending further, we reach the basalt basins, where vast lava lakes and rivers have etched a labyrinthine network. There are many safe paths through, but the routes tend to be circuitous. It's faster to go around or over with elevated rails if you can. The lava, aside from being a formidable obstacle, is also a resource abundant with iron, copper and stone. Finally, the pursuit of tungsten beckons exploration deeper within the lava maze. That's why you're really here, right? With unyielding toughness, that little drill you brought won't do you much good. I'm sure nothing will mind if you mine a little. But who knows what might awaken in the depths of Vulcanus. Okay, so let's have a look at that video as well. Again, just follows on from the last one. We're seeing again this lava, these random spots of fire. We then come around the corner here, and we find our final unique resource. There's sulfur as well, but you know the unique resource is titanium, and this is the titanium patch. And it appears the idea is that titanium is close to all these lava fields, and I think the calcite is closer to the volcanoes where the sulfur is as well. So I think that's the idea. They appear to be pretty big patches, I would say. Obviously, you don't know the richest of them, but one of the things they point out is it's difficult to build, you know, like just nice straight mining things, and that's clearly a challenge they wanted to introduce for this planet. We'll then come around the corner here, just another big lava field. Now it doesn't show us, but the implication of the text is that there is some form of unique biter or enemy. Maybe they're not called biters, but some form of unique enemy on this planet. I did sort of pause this just to check whether maybe there was a corner hint of a biter nest or something like that, but no, we can't see that. And I think this refers back to when we saw good old Squidly, Gribbly alien there. This is further confirmation to me that, I mean, this may not be the alien that's on this planet. I suspect probably not. But there is going to be alien life on the other planets, and this is what this was teasing, that this is an alien on one of the other planets, and we're going to get some form of other alien. As a speculation point, I'm going to guess that they will have some kind of toxic or sulfur-based, like sulfur acid-based attack. Obviously, the worms and spitters kind of have that already, but I think there's going to be something slightly different, you know, about the way that they attack, or you know, the type of acid they use, or you know, something slightly different to give them a bit more uniqueness compared to Nauvis. I suspect they're going to be tougher. I think the idea is that, you know, they're going to have stronger armor. Maybe, you know, titanium is on the planet, so perhaps the idea of the biter, you know, ecology is that they use the local resources. So the biters we see on Nauvis use iron, stone, you know, copper as in their carapace, whereas these guys use titanium, which is extra tough. So I think there might be tougher enemies. As I also think there might be, because there's sulfur on the planet freely available, they'll have, or sulfuric acid, they'll have some kind of, you know, more dangerous acid attack, or you know, they'll use acid in some different way. Oh, I suppose also I didn't really say, but as well as heat as a hazard, I think the sulfur itself will be a hazard. I think you might take damage when you're close to these, you know, sulfur, you know, belching geysers, acid geysers. I think there might be a damage aspect to it, which is part of the reason, as well as being quicker, that you're in the tank. You know, you're protected from it when you're in the tank, for example. But I think the idea is that this planet is quite hostile, you know, to us. But the titanium and the calcite, I don't know what the calcite would be used for. We'll go on to that. But, you know, I think the titanium is going to be such a vital resource that's why you're here, really, even though it's difficult. And obviously with all the cliffs, building is going to be a bit of a pain. It does beg the question, if you turn cliffs off, do you still have to deal with the cliffs here? Or does cliffs only apply to at Nauvis cliffs? Or maybe you can disable, you know, the other ones. It would seem if it's meant to be such a hazard, that would be making it really quite easy. If you're having to work around that. Oh yes, so the other thing, when it talks about throwing stuff in the lava, it says outdated gadgets, cursed rings of power. Obviously, you know, Lord of the Rings reference. So it then says maybe even unwanted company. So again, it could be, you know, this is meant to be jokey, and that's not really, you know, saying anything. And one possibility is that you can throw other players, you know, like when you do multiplayer, throw them in the lava somehow. But also the other point is that this may be a way to defend from biters. I mean, you could go as extreme as that, you know, there's a new lava turret and it spits lava out. But it's interesting that, you know, lava is a hazard for the biters, given that you would expect the lava patches to be like water and they should path around it. This seems to imply that perhaps you can, you know, they won't, you know, use the lava. They won't avoid the lava, and you can build your bases such that the lava is an issue for the biters, or as I say, you could spit lava at them or do something like that. It's an interesting comment, and what it's pointing at is, I think, is some way of using it in relation to biters. Yes, we also have the note here that the calcite can be mined using normal mining drills. So your trusty mining drills. Basically, the cliffs make it difficult to build, but you can mine calcite with normal mining drills. So that's obviously clearly an early resource. There's also, I don't know if it really, where does it say? I'm not sure where it says it, but calcite is an odd, interesting choice. It's a real mineral, and one of the things you do with it, or one of the things that happens is when you apply acid. So that 2H plus, I don't know how much chemistry you might happen to know, but basically that is what makes acid acidy, is the hydrogen plus, which is basically a proton, because hydrogen is just a proton and an orbiting electron, so it's electrically balanced, but if you strip that electron away, it just becomes a proton. So it's one of the reasons hydrogen is so very reactive. But basically, when you combine it with, that's calcite, basically. So it's basically a calcium carbonate. You get calcium, water, and carbon dioxide. So there's possibly one of the answers. When we have, we know we've got sulfuric acid from the sulfur fumaroles. We know we've got calcite that can be mined from just using normal mining drills. When you react calcite with acid, you get calcium. Maybe that's what we want to throw away. I mean, you could make limestone out of it, so maybe it's another way of making stone. They mention that lava can be turned into stone though, so that seems a bit odd. So maybe that's a useful resource. Maybe we have to make glass at some point, and that's what that's for. Maybe we even have to make titanium glass, and that's used in that. I mean, it wouldn't normally. Glass is, normal glass is silicon, but we don't have silicon in the game. But you also get water and carbon dioxide. Both could be useful. Carbon dioxide could be used for all sorts of things, or it could just be a waste product. But water, of course, as I was mentioning, if this planet is not meant to have any actual water on it, this could be how you get water. That you have to react calcite with acid, both of which are freely available, to give you, 3 output streams. And obviously, it's a game, they could do whatever they want. They could stick, they could call this limestone or something instead, so different ways of doing it. But yes, that's an interesting thing, because calcite as a thing isn't actually all that useful. It's not like a massively used mineral, basically. So it sounds like, and it mentions in the text somewhere that it's really about reacting the calcite with things. And I say it was just interesting that is the reaction for getting water, and there doesn't appear to be any free water on this planet. So maybe that's the intended source of water, because sending rockets with barrels of water around seems daft, but that's maybe how we get water. Oh yes, and tungsten. I speculated some time ago that tungsten was going to be the resource that we would be mining somewhere on one of the planets. So it looks like that's confirmed. Tungsten, of course, is a very hard mineral and very hard metal, and is used a lot in aerospace applications, which is interesting because the space platform, of course, and rockets, you've already got them, and you can make them out of iron, apparently, presumably, and copper and oil. So what do we need tungsten for? Because my thought originally was that space platforms would actually require the tungsten. That you would have to build a rocket, and that would get you to another planet, and then you would mine up tungsten, and then you would be able to make these space platforms or space ships. But clearly that's not, or maybe it is the case, but I'm not taking that to be the case. I'm taking it to mean that tungsten is used in other things, other machines. It does state, with its unyielding toughness, the little drill you brought won't do you much good. To me, that's saying two things. I think we can't hand mine it. I don't think you could sort of stand there and mine it to get enough to do like whatever your initial application would be. but also that we can't mine it with normal mining drills. And I think, and it's really a guess, I think that means that it needs a second type of mining machine, not that, because you can mine uranium, but you have to use sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid is freely available on the planet, so maybe it just means that it's another mineral that has to be mined with an acid. I don't think it's saying that. I think it's saying you need a special mining drill that mines tungsten, or mining system, shall we say, that mines tungsten because it's so hard. This could be a reference back to this original tease that we had quite a long time ago. We know that we're going to have to process things in different ways. We know that somehow we're going to have to extract sulfur from some kind of sulfur geyser. I was speculating that this looked like it was some kind of gas chamber or something like that. Maybe these are the new equivalent of pump jacks that you can put on the sulfur acid geysers, and it extracts the sulfuric acid. Maybe this is how we process tungsten. We have to smelt it. Obviously, I don't think that's how you mine it. And there's still no real clue as to what that one is. So that's a guess, basically, that what we're going to find is that to mine tungsten, we need some special machine, and maybe it's this one. I don't think so, but I also think this is maybe for getting sulfuric acid, and this is how we process the tungsten. I suppose there's also the possibility that this was a tease of like the harder biters on Vulcanus. Maybe they're slightly different color, and they are basically just biters, but different color and much more tougher. That could be a possibility. Designing the planet. When designing planets or bodies for a solar system, unless they are all moons, then you'd expect different planets to be different temperatures, with hotter planets closer to the sun and colder planets further away. Of all the planets you visit, there should be a hottest and a coldest, and it didn't feel right for either of those to be Nauvis. So, as expected, we have at least one planet hotter and at least one planet colder than Nauvis. I think that's referring, as I mentioned, to this, that I think this is Vulcanus, and that was the placeholder, right? And this is the cold planet, and that this builds up to this, because surviving and operating and mining and whatever you have to do on this planet, because it's so cold, is a lot more difficult. I think the idea maybe is that hot is easier than cold, but I say that's clearly another green planet like Nauvis, so maybe Nauvis is here. We've already know that this is closer to Nauvis than closer to the sun than Nauvis. So this is probably a similar sort of distance to Nauvis. This is like the Mars-like planet, where it's a very similar type of place, but further away. And then this is much more distant from the sun and is therefore colder. Vulcanus is the hottest planet, named after Vulcan, the Roman god of fire, volcanoes, desert, metalworking, and the forge. The name is appropriate for both this planet's terrain and the planet's specific technology. Again, I think that's referring to this. I think the smelting and how you do that is that's titanium. That's what you have to do, and that's the technology that you get /research / need. Being the hottest planet, I wanted Vulcanus to have lava. I got some pushback on this on the basis that lava worlds are too cliché in games. It's not untrue. Planet uniqueness is certainly a high priority, but it had some counter-arguments. Firstly, that would only be true if the planet was one-dimensional and only about being lava-y. 2, if we don't have parts of the landscape hotter than Earth, then as our hot planet, many people would find it underwhelming. The lava would be notable by its absence. As long as the planet would still be interesting, even if the lava were removed, then it's still a strong design. Adding lava doesn't have to detract from the other features of the planet, as long as it is done right. So I think that's basically just saying that, it is right, it is right. There's lots of games with lava areas, and even Dyson Sphere program, one of it already has lava planets, and it does geothermal and it does all that stuff, and it's not, in a sense, the most original idea, but I think that it's a well-made point. Just because it's not original, doesn't mean you can't put it in your game. I think it's fine, and so long as it looks good. It's interesting to talk about it being one-dimensional and only about it being lava-y. I guess the point there is that, there's going to be new combat mechanics for the new biters. There's these new resources. There's new ways of processing these resources. And that, literally, if you turn the lava off, it wouldn't matter. from a gameplay perspective. It would, because how else would you get iron and copper and stone on that planet? But the point is that it's not the be-all and end-all, and so the point was it still works. The point also seems to be being made that if you didn't have a lava planet, and yet the planet was or the planet didn't have lava, and yet it was saying it's closer to the sun, that breaks with people's expectations. You'd expect a planet closer to the sun, like Venus, like Mercury, sorry, to be fiery and lavary and all that sort of stuff, just like it is in our solar system and other solar systems. So it's like it would be weird for it not to be. So we have a volcanic planet, but it's more about the ashy plains, the mountains, and the sulfuric acid geysers than the lava rivers and volcano tops. Also, it's worth noting that earlier in the planet's development, there were some additional forms of vegetation, but those were later moved to a different planet so that we could amplify the specific desolate and scorched atmosphere that makes this planet unique and distinct from the others. So, there's a sort of hidden hint there that there's new vegetation coming. We know we've got these tree-like entities. We've also got normal trees. There's going to be some new vegetation. What could that be? Are we talking plants that attack us, maybe? Or, maybe we're having to do biology-style stuff of farming and in order to get some kind of unique resource. It's interesting that there would be, a specifically mentioned additional form of vegetation. On this planet, I wanted the different areas to be useful for different things so that you treat them differently and adapt to the landscape. You can't just pave over everything until ultra late game. So initially, each area has a role. So obviously, just a note there, until ultra late game. So landfill is not going to work on lava. We need some kind of ultra landfill in order to, shall we say, terraform the planet, as it were. I would hope that also has the you can remove it thing as well, and that doesn't just apply to normal landfill. Firstly, the ashlands are a great place to build because they are flat and can easily be cleared of the sparse vegetation. Secondly, the mountains have 2 critical resources you need immediately, but they are difficult to build on until you get cliff explosives. The lava rivers area starts as an obstacle, but later transitions to be the most important area to mine. So, ashlands are flat and obviously have the coal and bits of vegetation, meaning the tree-like things. Mountains have the 2 critical resources you need immediately. Now we know that means the calcite and the sulfur, because we know that those are in the mountains. The lava rivers start as an obstacle because lava's a pain, and you got to drive around it, and you can't landfill over it, and maybe only elevated trains works and stuff like that. But the later transition to the most important area to mine. So, looking at the map, the yellow blobs are in fact, let's pop this up as a complete image. We know the black is the coal. The little green dots are trees, or the tree-like things. The 2 resources that are in the mountains, and these are meant to be mountains, basically. It explains it later on, but this is a volcano, essentially. But basically then the sulfur and the calcite are both located there. And it says you need them immediately. And again, that to me means that you combine the 2 to make water, because water is quite an important resource, actually, in Factorio. Not least of all for making steam power, for example. Which is another question. It doesn't really explain how power works. Can we use lava for that? Can we use geothermal? Or is it a case of making calcite, using that to make water, and then you can have boilers, basically. The lava areas are these ones with the big splats of lava around, and this is then the titanium. And look how some of this titanium is almost inaccessible until the point you get the sort of super landfill, because some of this is not quite completely blocked off. You could wander on it, but imagine trying to mine that, because there's a cliff there as well. So how are you going to get in and mine all of that? Although we know, we hinted at we need a second type of mining machine, but they just wouldn't fit on those types of patches. So yeah, I think a lot of this might be designed to try and overcome that thing or give cliffs more of a point. They're still going to be annoying, but like in a more directed way, rather than just, oh, this is in the way, I need to get rid of it. It's like the whole point is that this is a cliff-rich area, and you've got to try and learn how to work around it. Because, there are a lot of... to say they're meant to represent, volcanoes, But there are a lot of cliffs on this. It's going to be an absolute nightmare of building. On the map, you can see the mountains as the large circular structures, lava basins and the areas with many lava rivers, and ashlands are the remaining flatter areas with green specks, trees. That's just what I was explained. So this is a mountain, this is a mountain. I mean, it's really more a volcano, I think, more than a mountain, but mountain, these are the ashlands with the flat plains and the trees and the coal, and then these are lava fields, basically. It looks awesome. They mentioned later on that we're going to get a Friday Facts explaining how they did this, like the map generation. I'm really looking forward to that. Over time, the lava has become more of a pivotal part of the gameplay because it provides a lot more of new opportunities. It is a new obstacle that you can't landfill for a long time, a new resource, and a new way to void items. So, including lava, here's a breakdown of the resources you have available. Lava gives you iron, copper, and stone. The excess can be thrown back in. Coal gives you coal, but with liquefaction, you can get the secondary oils too. Sulfuric acid geysers give you sulfuric acid directly. Calcite is a new resource, which is only useful when combined with other things, such as sulfuric acid. Tungsten is an ore that requires some special smelting methods compared to iron and copper. So that's referring back. I don't want to imply that I was some genius who'd worked this out beforehand. I'd read this through, because I learned my lesson from last week. And I read this through and had to think about what that meant. And I had a look on Wikipedia. And I say calcite you can make water from, basically. So I think that's what it's getting at. That in order to do, because it talks about, gives you coal, but with liquefaction you get the secondary oils too. So, because the thing with that is, if the only way of making oil is with coal liquefaction gives you a lot of heavy oil. And of course, it's not heavy oil that you really need. It's things like petroleum and light oil. So, in order to process heavy oil into light oil and petroleum, you need water. In fact, quite a lot of water. So that to me is how you get, and if it's a planet without water, as it's literally said there, water is not listed, the only way of getting it is through the calcite plus sulfuric acid, I think. Interesting that it says lava gives you iron, copper and stone. So we have some way, apparently, of extracting and mining lava. Now, of course, lava is just these great big lakes, and there didn't appear to be like a lava, fountain or something like that you could mine. So it implies to me that there's some kind of new device that's going to sit in the water, oil platform style, and like pump lava, basically. And that you can then take that lava, and is that what's being shown here? Oh, I've got the wrong one. I was going to switch over all dramatic there. Is that what's being shown here? This is a lava processor? But the implication is you process the lava to give you iron, copper and stone. My assumption, in terms of throwing stuff back into the lava, is that perhaps stone comes out as the most, that's the biggest proportion. It's say 90% stone, and you just don't have any use for this stone. Also, is this therefore an infinite resource? Because why would the lava dry up? It could be a mechanic in the game, but this to me implies that iron, copper and stone are infinite resources for this planet. Basically, you can stick these lava in. Then I would doubt they'll do, dramatic terrain changes during the game, but that's infinite. And especially since, infinite in the sense that you probably need calcite, and calcite is limited in the usual way. But yeah, that appears to be saying there's going to be an infinite source of iron, copper and stone on this planet. Tungsten and ore. So yes, there's special smelting methods. I say my suspicion is it is this, and that this is tungsten smelting rather than the lava processing. But yeah, it needs some kind of special melting. So it needs special mining and special smelting. Interesting. The map generation, landscapes, biome distributions, etc., was the hardest part of this whole process. I'm sure that I spent a lot more time designing and building the landscape itself than any single thing that goes on it. The task is a unique blend of maths, code and artistry. I'll cover more on how this was designed and made in a future Friday Facts. Trying to explain it now will make this post far too technical. One area I can explain quickly though is the starting area. Vulcanus has a very predictable starting area compared to Nauvis, and this is required not just to give you access to convenient starting resources, but primarily to show you what sort of terrains that these resources appear on. Knowing the terrain associations is important here because, for example, if you want to find more sulfuric acid, then you should be exploring mountains to find it. The starting area has 3 distorted circles representing a mountain, basalt basin and an ashland plateau. These circles have guaranteed resources patches of sulfuric acid, calcite, coal and tungsten. The whole arrangement can be rotated and flipped to not look too repetitive across different game seeds. All of this is done with basic maths and trigonometry, plus a bit of distortion that we will ignore for now. If you're learning trigonometry and wondering if it is ever useful, yes it is. This is just one of many ways. So this is just the map. I've sort of popped it out on a separate thing. Basically the point is a bit like with the normal Factorio, where it ensures that you've got an iron patch, a copper patch, a coal patch and a stone patch all in the starting area, where the player is. This is basically saying that you'll have a mountain, an ashland and a lava basin all within your starting area. Presumably there's a bit of randomness going on, and the reason for that is that then gives you coal for the ashlands, the tungsten for the lava basin, and then sulfuric acid and calcite for the mountain. Therefore, you've got all the basic resources and you can kind of crack on. The origin here, as I say, is presumably there's some variability in where it actually drops you. My guess and assumption is that, this is you getting down via rocket. It's not clear to us. We've not really had a lot of explanation of how you get from platforms to planets, but I'm presuming it's just a rocket that takes you down and it spawned you here and generates the map, basically. One of the things that is interesting to note is that these are the icons now for the in-game resources. So this is clearly the sulfur, fumaroles or geysers or whatever you want to call them, and this is obviously coal. But this is one we've seen before. So on the Friday Facts talking about remote view, there was this image and it had loads of Easter eggs on it. And if when we zoomed in, I did a video on this, you can go and watch that whole video. Yes, when we zoomed in, we spotted a new icon and we saw it a couple of times. This one here, I'm not sure it's not better shown on the other one, but we spotted this a couple of times and this is clearly calcite. No, it isn't. Yes, it is. So this here, unless I'm getting them the wrong way around, it's obviously, until you've been playing with it gets a bit confusing, doesn't it? But this appears to be calcite. Now, I would have thought tungsten would be the one being sent down. So what's particularly interesting about that, if that is the calcite, and I've not completely messed that up, the tungsten doesn't appear to be being brought to Nauvis in this image. Now, it could be that it's hidden under one of these icons. I did have a bit of a look through, and maybe, it just, because it looks very similar to coal. They have said these are placeholders, but it looks so similar to coal that maybe it is here and you just can't spot it, or maybe it's behind these or something like, the text or something like that. And it is here somewhere, you just can't see it. But it's interesting that calcite would be the thing being brought back rather than tungsten. Maybe it's better to bring tungsten, as the actual smelted product, and calcite is just more useful for other stuff. What the heck it would be useful for, I don't know though. But yeah, so this basically is sort of how they've done their thing. For the tile sets within each landscape, the nature of the setting steered us in particular directions. Rock, ash, lava, etc. But there was still a lot of creative freedom within that. With volcanic rock, for example, there are a lot of different ways it can look, ranging from sponge-like pumice to folded glassy rock that almost looks like melted black plastic. We used a lot of reference photos to start the tile sets and gradually shifted them to something more purposefully alien. Factorio is a stylized game, but I try to make sure that when we diverge from reality, we do so intentionally and not out of ignorance. The typical workflow is that I'd either make a sketch of a tile set or gather some reference images. Vogel would make the textures in Substance Designer and Blender. Then we'd go through many rounds of me painting over sections of the tile set and Vogel making adjustments. When things were close to finished, then I'd do a colour correction pass so that all the tile sets integrate correctly into their respective biomes. And now it's just some zoom-ins of the terrain, basically. Again, it just looks awesome. It's, I know it's dark and dingy, and this is even more dark and dingy, and that's Factorio's aesthetic, and it's not to everyone's cup of tea, but I just love it. I mean, that actually really looks like a lava flow that's kind of solidified. You then got this straggly little vegetation, a sort of a rock field, something that looks like it could have been a desert. I think this is meant to be the ashlands, and this is the ash basically. Different types of rock terrain, cracked old lava fields, old lava flows, and then you've got the lava glowing underneath, which is always a really amazing thing. You know, I've never been. I'd love to go to Iceland and sort of see some of this sort of stuff, and then a sort of a more bouldery, different version of that. The lava requires some special attention. I've made glowing lava in the 1.1 version of the game engine a couple of times now, but I had to choose between something that has motion but looks like orange water, or something that looks like lava but has no motion to it. For the 2.0 engine lava, Virgil made a prototype lava shader outside of the game and got something looking good using a multitude of texture layers and distortion. Doing it this way round was good because then when the shader was implemented in-game by him and Pasilla, it was already known how many layers we'd need, what gets distorted by what, and so on. A more typical approach might be that the shader was coded by a programmer first and then the artist would try to work within the constraints of the system, but I'm sure giving the artist some say in the initial constraints saved a lot of time. That's not to say that there weren't revisions, there were many, but we have a lot to do and saving time with a good workflow where we can certainly helps. Yes, so this is lava, the full image, just on one page. It's a little subtle. You can see the flame firing up more dramatically. It's a little subtle, but it is sort of wobbling and sort of, you know, like it's a liquid to some degree. I say it's a bit of a subtle effect, and that makes sense because, you know, they didn't want it to be extreme because then it'd look like the water effect, and if it was too mild, it would just look like it was static. So, as many of you noticed from a previous Friday Facts deconstruction planner icon, we have some new cliffs. We tried using darker versions of Nalva's cliffs, but that just wasn't good enough. Cliffs for this planet and others are made by Lucas. On this planet, the particular challenge with cliffs is making them visible enough. They're dark objects on a dark background, and for the north direction especially, the first versions were very difficult to see. I found that if I added a large fake shadow below the north-facing cliff and a top-edge highlight on all the cliffs, then it would get them into a state where they are readable and still integrate well with the terrain. The trade-off is a bit of unrealistic light and shadow, but usability is far more important here. So this is just what they're showing. I think they do look really good. I always thought the cliffs looked good. It's just they're a pain to work with and a pain to manage in game. The highlight does make it look a little bit like, it's that thing of you can tell if something is like a bump because it's got highlight on one side and a shadow on the other. And that's the sort of problem that I have with this. It's not extreme, I don't think it matters, but the highlight makes it look like it's going up. So effectively, those look a little bit like they're sausages, if you see what I mean. I'm sure when you're playing in game, and you get this anyway with the cliffs, sometimes they just don't make sense. They just like, because it's an optical illusion they're using to make it look like there's two heights, and they're doing it with shadow and that sort of thing. Whereas in reality, they're effectively just sort of walls. And there's the same sort of thing here. So I think this area, this looks really good. But this looks more like it's a bump rather than it's a cliff, if you see what I mean. I'm sure playing it just won't matter. You won't really notice and you won't really care. It's just that as I'm sat here, analysing it and speculating about it, it just feels a little bit like that highlight is a little bit too extreme. And they do make the point, Andor makes the point that usability is far more important than it looking realistic. So, I think it's fine. But as I say, it does occasionally just to me look like a sausage rather than the edge of a cliff. You can see a lot of small and medium craters on the terrain, and they are just decorative, meaning there's no collision or interaction. They're flat enough to build on without it looking weird. If we tried to make larger craters this way, it wouldn't work because they'd either have to look too flat to look natural, or they'd look steep enough but placing a machine on the edge would look wrong. The solution is to make the craters collide, but then there are two more problems. The collision boxes are always rectangles, so hitting invisible corners is annoying, and there's a flat part in the middle that looks buildable but isn't. We also wanted some partial craters that would make even more special collision rules. The solution we came up with is more like a ring of special cliffs where sections of the ring can randomly be removed. Unlike normal cliffs, we don't have special start and end sections. Virgil has made sure that all the cliff sections can visually overlap to make a full circle but still look right if they're on the edge of a broken crater. If I find a full circle crater, I like to put turrets in the middle like a little fort. The craters they're talking about, I think, are these. So they're more sort of, they're more like decorative items is the point. So that's a fairly large crater there, for example. but it doesn't look big enough and like high enough that you couldn't build on it. That makes sense for building machines on top of. But they wanted proper craters as well, I think is the point. Meaning as in, big edges to them that you couldn't build on, and etc., etc. And of course, that would mean a special, that crater edging is not like that. Yeah, it's different graphically. Do we have another one? Yeah, so there's the edge of a cliff, and this is a crater. And the crater does look like, in a sense, what I was saying before about, a sausage. It sort of has two, proper distinct edges to it, where the idea with the cliffs always, when they do them, is that it's a flat piece like that. And so this really does look like a crater, in my opinion. I think this is actually a lot better looking. But also the existing cliffs, they haven't shown it, but if one of these was really close to this crater, it was going along there, say, it would still look okay. They've been very careful to do that, which is great. I don't know if the implication is we can't just take these down. They've already said, that these are a separate cliff. And I was saying before in my other Friday Facts video that maybe they require a special version of cliff explosives to remove. It seems to imply not that you can use normal cliff explosive, but maybe it does require a different type of cliff explosive. But maybe these aren't removable. Maybe these are fixed. Maybe the idea is the rock is so hard you can't get rid of it. But maybe you can just flatten them out. The other thing here, Arundel says that, that he treats them like a little fort, which they kind of are. This is impregnable, I think. Unless the idea is you can get through here. But this appears to be a completely circular defence, and so, it'd only be spitting or flying enemies that could actually get to this, so it would be completely impregnable. And, we know the biters can't chew through cliffs, so it would be unattackable by, regular land biters. But these are laser turrets, is what I was going to point out, which again, and from what was said before, I don't think it's meant as a hidden thing, but there's clearly biters or clearly some sort of enemy that requires lasers to defend with. Oh, and I guess just to note, when it mentioned about the deconstruction planner, I forgot to show it at the time, but just to note, this is what it was talking about. There was this deconstruction planner that apparently had two cliffs on it, and it does. Basically, these are the Nauvis type cliffs, and maybe other planets as well. And then these are the Vulcanus cliffs. We still don't really know what's going on here. I'm wondering if this is the special vegetation. There's maybe that's what the special vegetation is. It's super trees that you have to get rid of, and maybe that's why one of our planets on here is especially green, that it's covered in super trees, and that the big mission for them is getting rid of the trees. That's the difficult bit, because they're obviously annoying at the moment, but once you got bots, you can just clear cut the whole area. Maybe you can't with this new vegetation, or maybe it grows back or something like that. And that's what's going on with this icon, because we didn't recognise the tree as such. It didn't look right. Sulfuric acid geysers are both a regional point of interest and a resource. I designed these areas to look almost like a sub-region in their own right. These areas aren't huge because they are resource indicators, and if the region is too big, then it's harder to find the right spots to place your equipment. Finding the right spots is also made easier by these resource nodes having yellow smoke. Yes, we can now have animated resources. Jersey has made the acid puddles of this section in a couple of ways. Earlier on we had puddles filled with liquid acid, but we moved to dried up puddles to make the planet feel drier. Also, building on shallow liquid acid puddles doesn't look right. I sort of misread that a bit, sort of got my tongue tied a bit. But basically the idea is that these are the resource nodes. So the actual thing spitting out the acid, that's where you're putting your equivalent. And I say whether it's the machine we looked at before, that's where you're putting your punk jack equivalent. It's great that these are now animated. I hope they go back and do oil, and that we get a proper animated oil patch, because at the moment it's like one of the naffest looking things in the game. So I hope that we get some kind of animated oil patch of some description. And what they're talking about with the puddles is you see these little splots here, these sort of shapes. The idea is that, there's maybe been an acid, eruption, like a geyser on, Yellowstone Park that we've all seen, and it's then dried up because it's so hot and dry and stuff like that, that the liquid acid has kind of boiled away. Because one of the points they made is that if you built a machine on top of it, it looked weird if it was a liquid, which it would. It'd be like building an assembly machine on the water. It just wouldn't look right. These thermal vent chimneys are one of the areas we diverge more from a typical Earth volcano. They add a lot of verticality to the terrain when you are exploring and help it feel a bit more alien instead of just an extreme part of Earth. The young chimneys are small, the medium ones are tall, and the old ones have crumbled back to their bases. The landscape doesn't change on its own, but these little touches help it feel like it's a changing world. So this then shows like a sort of a variety of them. What I'm taking that to mean, I don't know whether all of these are mineable. I don't know if that's the idea, and you can mine any one of them. You can tap all of them as resources, or perhaps it's only ones where you've got the yellow one, maybe. I don't know. But basically, the idea is that these small ones are new, and that's why it's got all the puddles around it, because it's a new eruption of sulfuric acid. Whereas these are more established and a bit like a geyser on Earth, or well, not like a geyser, like the deep sea vents. As material accretes, as it more eruptions and more material comes on, it sort of builds itself a little funnel, and that's clearly what these are meant to be, as the material has built up over years and eons. They make the point that it's not going to change; these are fixed. But the idea is that like the big ones and sort of these ones here, where it's all sort of collapsed back, and presumably that's defunct. But it's just giving that flavour of, well, this, many millennia ago there was an acid, fumarole here, and now it's, collapsed in on itself, and because there's no pressure in the acid left, and it doesn't really make it. Whereas these ones are brand new, so they're only, they're erupting new material and not really having built up a particular, cone shape. But as I say, whether we can mine, because I don't know if you can see on this, it's quite subtle, but there is smoke coming out of some of these big old ones. Not that I can tell out of these, flattened dead ones, I think. But these bigger, older ones, there is smoke coming out of them, and they're obviously still active. So whether we can mine every single one, I don't know. But yeah, it might be interesting that some of them you can't, and maybe there's that acid effect goes on then that once they're all, you can't cap them all because the big ones you can't cap, and and that's why it's still acid damage for you later on. I wanted the ashlands to look like a spectral burnt forest with dark, leafless shapes looming over you. The trees, if that is even the right word for them, are alive, but we didn't want them to look leafy or anything like actual healthy trees. Presumably they get most of their energy by breaking down chemicals instead of photosynthesis, or perhaps they exploit the temperature gradient between the bottom and the top of the ash. From that point of view, they are maybe more like an endolith fungus, but they have trunk-like shapes and a tree-like roll, so for now we call them trees. And this is the image of the various of the vegetation. As Aaron says, they are sort of tree-ish. They look like trunks, without trees on them. But you might say it below, and I've just gone past. Oh, by the way, this is one of the half incomplete craters. So we've got part missing of the crater thing, and obviously you've got a rock still. This is a dead sulfur thing. But yeah, these are the various trees. Presumably, when you chop them, you get wood. And that's a way of, getting wood for, I don't know, wooden chests or whatever so that you can store things. And, we know we're going to get lots of junk that we need to chuck in the lava. So maybe that's, a way of getting that. And obviously for, burning early on and all that sort of stuff. So there's that. But again, I noted before, some of them are on fire. So presumably they're hazardous, but also presumably maybe they're you can't use a flamethrower on them is what I'm thinking. And, if the fire goes on them, they don't burn. They just sort of sit there smouldering. So you can't burn the trees down, or, the fungus things down, maybe. But yeah, it's sort of, I'm not 100% sure what that's meant to obviously it's just a graphical thing, but is that meant to represent something, that you can't burn the trees down? Or that they're basically immune to fire? A lot of work has been done so far, but there are still a few remaining placeholders. The obvious ones for now are the tungsten and calcite resource graphics. Those will be replaced soon. Hopefully the others don't stand out too much like the hand-painted decoratives in the ash sand area, because it may take longer to replace those. So this is presumably the calcite, I think. Because of where it is and sort of what it is. Basic point they're making is it's placeholder for now, really, and they are working on the graphics. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it looks too bad, to be honest with you. It is a bit sort of, it would be nice for them to look properly different rather than just a differently coloured ore. This is sort of that thing of being the devs, they can do something properly different, and if they've got animation, maybe they can make it, wibble in some way, whereas a lot of mods just have to just take iron and colour it pink, and stuff like that. So it would be nice for it to look very different, but I don't think this looks bad. And it is quite distinct from the background. It's not like it's the coal blends in. It could do with something a bit different there, or some special effect applied to it to make it clear where the coal is. But the calcite stands out pretty well, I think. Conclusion. The path tears through ashy barrens and burning trees, winds around lava rivers and up jagged foothills, crunches through dusty calcite and splashes through sulfuric acid geysers to the top of a mountainous volcano. Just being here feels epic. Vulcanus is the most developed new planet so far, and getting to this state has been a big team effort involving most of the art team. When we return to Vulcanus, you'll get to see more of the new processes of the planet and how the new resources are used. We'll also show off a couple of new structures, one that we've teased before. Can you guess which one it is and what it does? As always, erupt your thoughts to the usual places. So it's not really speculation. I've been kind of doing that as I've gone along, because I found it's easier just to integrate them into as I go along in the videos and just give thoughts as I go. But it obviously asks the question as to what the machine is. I think, as I've mentioned before, that it's this, or one or more of these, and that this is how you process tungsten. Tungsten is famous for its hardness. That's kind of what its main thing is, and heat resistance, which is interesting. As I say, it is used in rocketry and that sort of thing. So if we go here, they've got a little thing about talking about its uses. And as I say, it's used in rockets basically for nose cones, and it's used for the the rocket engines and stuff like that, because it's very heat resistant while also being hard but not too heavy. And those are the kind of the main uses for it, which is interesting because, as I mentioned before, we're going to another planet, so we've got rockets, we've got space platforms, presumably, unless space platforms really do need tungsten, but, we've got these things already. So if that's one of their main uses for them on Earth, what are we using them for in Factorio, since we can already build rockets out of iron and copper, etc.? So that's a key question. What is the use of tungsten in Factorio? I think it's still rockets and rocket related. But my guess, and this comes back to my big speculation about what we're doing in Space Age, what the new end goal is, and my thought is it's to do with building a megastructure. Potentially that megastructure is on the final planet, and it's a big portal for us to get home, for example. Another option might be that we're building a great big spaceship so that we can, fly back to our home planet. And therefore we need things like tungsten to make novel rocket parts and that sort of thing. So because one of the things that's sort of missing from Space Age is a proper spaceship. We're going to space and we're using rockets simply to get to platforms and platforms to get between planets. So what about a proper rocket ship? What about a proper spaceship? We know that the engineer crashes on Nalvis in a spaceship. They are a pilot of a spaceship. There's a little Easter egg, I believe. I saw it somewhere, I can't remember where, that it's actually like the ship from StarCraft or something, or it's from another game, basically. So the implication is that they're like the pilot of a fighter, I think, in one of these other games. I cannot honestly remember what that is, but it's meant to look like another spaceship. But it looks like a spaceship, it looks like a fighter or something like that. And yet we're building space platforms and fairly crude rockets. So can we build an actual proper spaceship using this? But we don't build hundreds of them. We don't build dozens of them like you do in SpaceX. You build a spaceship that's a predefined thing. It's a gigantic ship for you to go to, your back home to your home planet or something like that. Or just to explore another space station. Maybe we'll get a new game plus or something like that. And I still think it's that. So the other option is maybe, I suppose it could be building a Dyson Sphere. That would feel like, they'd kind of reversed into Dyson Sphere program. But perhaps there's some megastructure, some structure in space that we're doing. Or, it's based on the planet, as I say. It could be some big portal or something like that. However, another thing I'd like to sort of mention is that I speculated before about perhaps there are asteroid fields, and your asteroid grabber, that was the subject of last week's blog, your asteroid collector, that perhaps there's something extra here to do with asteroids. Yeah, so that you have an asteroid field way out in the thing. It's mentioned that there are huge asteroids. So there's not just these ones we're seeing on this image here. There are huge asteroids, and that there are new weapons of some description that you use to break up those big asteroids so that you can, shoot them with your guns so that you can, grab the little chunks. And my speculation is to that is that maybe there's tungsten ammo. It would be odd to have uranium ammo, that is effectively depleted uranium ammo, on Earth, which is, depleted. The idea of depleted uranium ammo, it's a very heavy metal uranium, so it has a lot of impact, a lot of power, particularly when you put it in a tank round. The kinetic energy that you're delivering is incredible. But basically, it would be weird to introduce that having already got titanium bullets. So there could be, what I'm saying is there could be tungsten bullets, and that's what you shoot it with. My speculation, though, is that it's a properly new weapon. It's a railgun of some description, and that the tungsten is the ammo for the railgun. And it's tungsten slugs that you fire at these gigantic asteroids, breaks them up, breaks them into pieces, breaks them up. Now, why you would want to do that, given Vulcanus is a planet that has infinite iron and infinite copper, infinite stone as my speculation, so why you need to go out to asteroid fields to mine those for resources. My speculation there is that there is a special resource that you can only get from the asteroids. It's a fractional thing. You get a very small amount of it, per big asteroid, and that's why you want these things flying around, hoovering up, metals in space, basically, and that's why you dump out so much stuff. Why there's a need to dump out, because you blow up one of these big asteroids. Maybe it gives you, 1,000 total resources. 5% is this super mineral or whatever it is that you need. And 95% is, water, iron and copper, coal. It's not coal, it's carbon, I think it calls it. So 95% of it is just the normal stuff, and so you would quickly fill up the inventory of your space platform. So that's the real reason you need to dump stuff overboard, because you want to collect something that you only get in small amounts, and the collection mechanism involves, my speculation, that it's a railgun that you use to shoot the gigantic asteroids, and that's how you get it. I can't think of too many other uses. It could be that we're going to start to get alternate recipes. Maybe there is a super rocket, that's made with tungsten, is way more efficient, or, gives you more resources back, or something like that. Maybe we're going to get, super inserters or something that use tungsten. These are all possibilities. They don't feel like how they've built Factorio, and previous dev comments have kind of hinted that that's not really what they want to do with the expansion. They want to add more new stuff, rather than just adding sort of tedious layers of, well, now you can build Assembler 15, now you can build Assembler 20, now you can build, Chemical Plant 77. That's not how they want to expand the game. Of course, I think we might get a bit more of that. I think there are probably going to be extra levels of some things, just to give us a little boost, but more to be able to process the new materials. Like, you can only put fluids into a level 2 and above assembler. There'll be, as well as new machines, new ways of processing titanium, for example, with a level 4 assembler or something like that, maybe. But I think really the tungsten is for a new game mechanic. It's not, it's not that roboports need tungsten now, or, bots need tungsten or something like that. But we could see a situation where there's a tungsten engine, or perhaps rocket engines. You can only build like really crude rocket engines that, we've not seen yet, and that super, more advanced engines, proper engines for platforms, use tungsten. That could be one of the options. I say that type of thing feels like not how they're not going to do the expansion, but I say that's some possibilities that I was thinking about. I say the uses of tungsten are really military, and kind of where you need sort of super hardness. And another possibility there is that, and I'm not sure about this because they do mention that mining tungsten requires a second mining drill. And you would think, because tungsten carbide is like the hard mining, so, is used to wear-resistant abrasives and cutting tools such as knives, drills, circular saws, dies, milling, but turning tools. Those use tungsten. So they're presumably not going to create one of those, those self-serving loops, as it were, where, you need a tungsten drill in order to mine tungsten, but you can't make a tungsten drill until you've got tungsten. I don't think, I'm not thinking they'll go down that route because, the solution to that would be you'd have to hand mine it or something. I think instead it's that another use for tungsten will be a super mining drill. I say that would then be a third level of mining drill. Maybe you don't mine tungsten, you use the lava in some way, and you have to do lava around your mining things, maybe. But I suspect it's going to be used in some kind of better assembler or better mining machine or something like that, but not to improve, the production of, iron and copper type material, base materials. It's for whatever new thing we're building in order to build, say, those, the rocket, the spaceship parts, or, the portal parts or something like that. And it's used in a machine that is then, used on another planet or as part of the space platform to produce the new things, basically. Because I've speculated before that when we saw the planets, if this is the lava planet and gives us tungsten, this is the new bioplanet and that's what this new vegetation thing is about. Really don't know about this one, but this is the super cold planet and it's the furthest away from the sun. If you're building something like, a rocket, a spaceship, you probably want to build, you'd probably build it in a Lagrange point, to be honest with you, but building furthest away from the sun so that it gets, it can get out of the solar system quicker would be an idea. But we don't know what this planet is for. We know that each of these produce a new science pack. That's another point. Tungsten must be used to produce the orange science pack. So there's something going on there. So we don't know how that works. But these all produce a science pack, and this doesn't show it producing a science pack. So is it something else? As I say, to me, I think it's whatever the end game is. It's where we build something, or make something special rather than yet another science pack. So that was kind of the only big speculation I had. I think I kind of covered everything as I was going through. I like that, it's still very much, we're going to an entire new planet and we're getting 2 resources, one of which sounds like it's very much an intermediate type resource. It doesn't really do anything in and of itself. It just lets you make water and, process other things. Can't wait to see what the biters are. That's going to be interesting to see what the equivalent of the biters are. Intrigued by the whole mention of vegetation and those mechanics. I'm going to love this Factorio Friday Facts where they talk about, however this works. I suspect that'll be another one where nobody watches it because it'll be very techy and nerdy, but I love that sort of stuff, so I'm really looking forward to that. It's nice to see that this icon was quickly resolved. There weren't any other icons on that thing that I could see, so what the other resources are, I don't know. And maybe there are no other resources. Maybe there's just titanium and calcite and the other planets are used for some other purpose. I doubt that, but maybe that's how it works. My fear, the only thing I would say is negative, is I hate cliffs. I really like the look of cliffs and I like the sort of concept of cliffs. I basically never play with them on because I just find it too annoying to get rid of them. I have been trying deliberately in a couple of games recently to keep them on. It just gets so annoying so quickly. And for a planet that is basically 90% cliffs and possibly cliffs that you can't remove till later, that sounds like it's going to be very, very annoying. As I speculated in the main video, if we turn cliffs off, does that remove them? It would seem strange because that would seem then to be making it very easy when the whole point of this is to get you to work with cliffs, That seems to be the idea they're going for here. And then so if you took them off, the only challenges would be, well, whatever the heat issue is that I speculated about, whatever the sulfuric acid, breathing issue is that I speculated about, and then, the fact that lava can't be landfilled until much later, and those don't sound like they're going to be hugely challenging. So if you can just turn cliffs off, it sounds like this planet is going to be a lot easier. Hope you've enjoyed today's video and you might consider coming back for another one. If you want to chat about the latest Factorio Friday Facts, then you can find me live streaming Factorio on my Twitch channel at Trismegistus every Saturday afternoon. Thanks for watching. Cheers. Purposefully alien.